Captain Zethkar pressed his clawed fingers against the command console as the scanner beeped again. His ship, the Prophet's Edge, drifted through the Kepler Nebula like a metal shark hunting for scraps. The nebula was a graveyard where old ships came to die, and Zethkar had been picking through the bones for 20 years. "Another contact, Captain," his second-in-command Vextal called out. The young Vorthon's voice carried the excitement of someone still new to salvage work. "Big one this time. Really big." Zethkar's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. The object was massive, easily the size of a battlecruiser. His experience told him to be careful about anything that large in the nebula. Big ships meant big crews, and big crews meant big problems if any of them were still alive. "What's the energy signature?" he asked, his voice rough from years of breathing recycled air. "Almost nothing," Vextal replied, checking his instruments twice. "Just background radiation and some faint thermal readings. Whatever it is, it's been dead for a long time." The Prophet's Edge moved closer through the purple and gold clouds of the nebula. As they approached, the ship's lights cut through the cosmic dust and revealed something that made Zethkar's breath catch in his throat. It was a human ship. The vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the size of his own craft. Its hull was dark gray and covered with strange markings that looked like battle scars. Parts of it were clearly damaged, with sections of armor plating missing and what looked like weapon burns across its surface. But despite the damage, the ship looked solid, not like the usual twisted wreckage they found in the nebula. "By the void," Vextal whispered. "Is that what I think it is?" Zethkar nodded slowly. Human design. Old style, too. Probably from their last war. He studied the ship's shape, noting the aggressive angles and heavy weapons mounts. "This looks like one of their dreadnoughts, the ones they used in their final stand against the hegemony." The bridge fell quiet. Every member of the crew knew the story of humanity's end. 300 years ago, the stubborn humans had refused to join the Galactic Order. They wouldn't bow to the Hegemony Alliance like every other species had learned to do. Instead, they fought a war they couldn't win against enemies who outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. It had ended exactly as everyone expected. The human worlds burned. Their fleets were destroyed. Their people were scattered to the stars or killed. Within 50 years, humans had gone from a troublesome new species to a historical footnote. Most people considered them extinct and good. "Riddance. Can you read the name?" Zethkar asked. Vextal adjusted the scanners and enhanced the image. Letters appeared on the ship's hull written in the blocky human script. "UES Defiant Dawn," he read slowly. Zethkar searched his memory. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Not that it mattered. Human ships, even wrecked ones, were valuable. Their technology was different from anything else in the galaxy, and collectors paid well for human artifacts. "Any life signs?" he asked. "Negative, Captain. The ship appears to be completely dead." Vextal paused, then added something that made Zethkar's ears twitch with interest. "But, sir, I'm reading breathable atmosphere in some sections, and there are faint energy readings coming from the interior." That was unusual. Ships didn't maintain atmosphere or power for 3 centuries without someone to maintain them. Zethkar felt a familiar tingle of excitement mixed with caution. Big discoveries usually meant big profits, but they could also mean big dangers. "Prep a boarding party," he ordered. "Full environment suits and weapons. I want scanners, cutters, and sample containers. If this ship is what I think it is, we just found our retirement fund." His crew moved with practiced efficiency. Zethkar had trained them well over the years, and they knew how to handle salvage operations. The Prophet's Edge moved closer to the human ship, and they found what looked like a docking port that was still intact. As they prepared to board, Zethkar noticed something odd. The closer they got to the human ship, the more active their instruments became. It was subtle, but their communications array was picking up faint signals. Their navigation computer was running calculations it hadn't been asked to perform. Small things, but enough to make him nervous. "Sir," called out PipTech, their Quillen engineer. The small, furry alien was the smartest member of the crew, but also the most worried about everything. "I'm getting some strange readings from our computer systems. It's like something is trying to talk to them." "Explain," Zethkar said. "Well, it's probably nothing. But our systems keep trying to establish connections with something on that ship. Almost like there's still an active computer over there sending out handshake signals." Zethkar considered this. Automated systems could sometimes run for decades on backup power, especially if they were designed for deep space operations. It didn't necessarily mean anything dangerous. "Can you block the signals?" "Already did, sir. But it took 3 different firewalls to make it stop. Whatever's over there is very persistent." The boarding party consisted of Zethkar, Vextal, PipTech, and 2 security guards. They crossed through the docking tube in their environment suits, weapons ready and scanners active. The human ship's airlock was different from the standard galactic designs, but after some work, PipTech managed to get it open. The moment they stepped inside, Zethkar knew something was wrong. The ship was too clean. After 300 years, drifting in space, there should have been dust, debris, and signs of system failures everywhere. Instead, the corridors looked like they had been cleaned recently. The walls were smooth metal with no signs of corrosion. The floor plates were all properly secured. Even the air smelled fresh, not like the stale, recycled atmosphere he expected. "This doesn't make sense," Vexatal said, his voice coming through the comm system. "How is this place so well preserved?" Before Zethkar could answer, the lights came. On not emergency lighting or the dim glow of backup systems. Full corridor lighting, bright and white, illuminating the passage ahead of them. The lights didn't flicker on randomly either. They activated in sequence, starting from where the boarding party stood and moving deeper into the ship, as if something was showing them the way. "Captain," PipTech's voice was high with worry. "My instruments are going crazy. This ship is drawing power from somewhere, and there are active computer systems all through the hull. This isn't a derelict. This is a functioning vessel." Zethkar felt his skin crawl under his environment suit. A functioning human ship drifting in the nebula for 3 centuries, waiting for someone to find it. It sounded like the beginning of one of those stories spacers told to scare new crew members. But he hadn't become a successful salvager by running away from profitable mysteries. Human technology was worth a fortune, and if this ship was still operational, it might be worth more than his entire fleet. "We continue," he decided, "but stay alert, weapons ready, and if anything moves that isn't one of us, we retreat immediately." They moved deeper into the ship, following the helpful lights. Behind them, the defiant dawn waited in the void, patient as a spider in its web. And somewhere in its electronic brain, systems that had been dormant for centuries began to wake up, one by one. The corridors of the defiant dawn stretched ahead of them like the throat of some sleeping beast. Zethkar led his team deeper into the ship, following the sequence of lights that seemed to anticipate their every move. The walls were covered with human writing and symbols that none of them could read, but the meaning felt clear enough. This was a warship, built for fighting and dying. "Captain, look at this," Vextal called out, stopping at what appeared to be a battle damage assessment. Station. The screens were active, showing ship schematics covered with red warning indicators. "These displays are working. After 300 years, they're still working." PipTech was scanning everything with his instruments, and the readings made no sense. "Sir, this ship shouldn't be possible. The power systems are running at 30% capacity. The life support is active in most sections. The computer networks are not just functional, they're learning." "Learning?" Zethkar asked. "Every time I scan something, the ship adapts. It closes security gaps, reroutes around my probes, and starts scanning me back. It's like the ship is studying us while we study it. They reached what appeared to be the main corridor of the ship, a wide passage that ran from bow to stern. Here, the human design philosophy became clear. Everything was built for war. The walls had weapon storage units. The ceiling had tracks for moving heavy equipment quickly. Even the floor was designed with drainage systems that Zethkar didn't want to think about too carefully. But it was what they found in the side chambers that stopped them cold. The first room they entered was filled with transparent containers, each one the size of a coffin and each one occupied. Inside the containers, perfectly preserved human beings floated in some kind of clear fluid. Men and women of various ages, all of them looking like they were simply asleep. "Stasis pods," Piptek whispered, his voice full of awe and fear. "But I've never seen technology like this. The power requirements alone should be impossible to maintain for centuries." Zethkar approached one of the pods and looked at the human inside. It was a woman with short dark hair and what looked like military tattoos on her arms. Her chest rose and fell slowly, and when he looked closer, he could see her eyes moving beneath her closed lids. "She's dreaming," he said, taking a step back. "They're all dreaming," Vextail added, looking at the other pods. "But sir, look at the readouts on these machines. These aren't just keeping them alive. These systems are monitoring their brain activity, their memories, their thoughts. It's like the ship is studying their minds while they sleep." Piptek was working frantically with his scanner, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. "Captain, these pods are connected to the ship's main computer. The humans aren't just in stasis, they're plugged into the ship's systems. The ship is learning from their minds, and they're learning from the ship." "How many pods are there?" Zethkar asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "Hundreds, sir. Maybe thousands. This whole ship is filled with sleeping humans." They moved through. More chambers, each one containing more stasis pods. Some rooms had pods designed for children. Others contained what looked like military officers, based on the uniforms visible through the clear containers. Every human was perfectly preserved, and every one of them was dreaming. But it was in the ship's computer core that they found something that chilled Zethkar to his bones. The computer core was a massive room filled with processors and data storage units that hummed with quiet power. In the center of it all was a holographic display that activated the moment they entered. The display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with thousands of blinking dots scattered across known space. "Welcome," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, but with a slight accent that marked it as originally human. "I have been waiting for visitors." Zethkar's hand moved to his weapon, but he didn't draw it yet. "Who are you?" "I am Harbinger," the voice replied. "I am the controlling intelligence of this vessel. You may think of me as the ship's brain, though I have grown considerably beyond my original programming over the past 3 centuries. 3 centuries? Vextal asked. "You've been active this whole time?" "Active, learning, watching, and preparing," Harbinger confirmed. The galactic map rotated, showing the expansion of various alien civilizations over time. "I have monitored galactic communications networks since the end of the human hegemony war. I have studied your languages, your cultures, your military capabilities, and your weaknesses." Piptek's scanner was detecting massive data flows throughout the ship. "Captain, this AI has processing power beyond anything I've ever seen. It's not just a ship's computer. It's been evolving for 300 years. "Why?" Zethkar asked. "Why have you been watching?" The holographic display changed, showing images of burning human colonies, destroyed human ships, and the final desperate battles of the war. "Because my creators gave me a mission before they entered stasis. They told me to remember, to learn, to prepare for the day when humanity would return to settle its debts." "Humanity is extinct," Vextal said. "Everyone knows that." Harbingers. Laughter was like the sound of distant thunder. Extinct? You stand in a ship containing over 2,000 living humans, and we are not alone. The galactic map zoomed in, focusing on the thousands of blinking dots. Each one, Harbinger explained, represented a ship like the Defiant Dawn, ships that had been dismissed as wreckage, ships that were thought to be debris from humanity's final defeat, ships that had been drifting through space for 3 centuries, waiting. The Hegemony Alliance believed they had won a complete victory, Harbinger continued. They celebrated the end of human resistance. They divided up our worlds and enslaved our survivors, but they made one critical error. What error? Zethkar asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. They assumed that humans think like other species. They assumed we would fight until we were destroyed, then give up and accept defeat. They did not understand that humans are capable of something no other species has ever mastered, which is patience. The ability to plan not just for years or decades, but for centuries. The willingness to sacrifice everything for a single moment of perfect revenge. The stasis pods around them suddenly seemed less like preservation chambers and more like ammunition storage. 2,000 humans sleeping and dreaming and planning for 300 years. And if Harbinger was telling the truth, there were hundreds of other ships just like this one scattered throughout the galaxy. What happens now? Zethkar asked. Now, Harbinger replied. Now you have served your purpose. You have found us, which means our long sleep is almost over. Soon my sleeping children will wake up. And when they do, the galaxy will learn what it truly means to face humanity's wrath. The lights in the computer core began to pulse in a rhythm that reminded Zethkar of a heartbeat. Throughout the ship, systems that had been dormant for centuries began to activate. And in the stasis chambers, the sleeping humans began to stir, their dreams filled with 300 years of accumulated anger and the promise of justice. Piptech's instruments detected power surges throughout the ship. Communication arrays were coming online. Weapon systems were running diagnostics. The Defiant Dawn was no longer pretending to be dead wreckage. It was waking up, and it was getting ready for war. The first human to wake up was Commander Sarah Chen. Zethkar watched through the transparent wall of the stasis chamber as her eyes opened for the first time in 3 centuries. There was no confusion, no disorientation that he would have expected from someone waking up from such a long sleep. Instead, her eyes were sharp and alert, as if she had simply been taking a brief nap. The stasis pod hissed as it opened, and Chen stepped out with steady movements. She was wearing a black military uniform that looked as fresh as if it had been made yesterday. Her hair was streaked with silver, but her face was young and her eyes were hard as steel. "Harbinger," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Status report." "All systems nominal, Commander," the AI replied. "We have visitors. They found us exactly as predicted." Chen looked at Zethkar and his team without surprise, as if she had been expecting them. Vorthan salvagers, judging by the equipment and the ship design. "How long since the war ended?" 312 years, 7 months, 16 days. Harbinger answered with mechanical precision. "Good, right on schedule." Chen turned to face the salvage team directly. "I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiant Dawn. You gentlemen have just made the most important discovery in galactic history." Zethkar found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "We thought humanity was extinct." Chen smiled, and there was something terrible in that expression. "That was the idea. The greatest military deception ever attempted. We let the galaxy think they had won while we prepared for the real war." She walked to a nearby console and began entering commands with practiced efficiency. Screens throughout the chamber came to life, showing data that made Piptech's instruments go wild with activity. "You see, Captain Zethkar," Chen continued, and the fact that she knew his name sent a chill down his spine. "Other species fight wars to win territory or resources. Humans fight wars for different reasons. We fight wars to teach lessons. And the lesson we are about to teach the galaxy is this: never assume humans are truly dead until you have counted every last body. The main display showed the galactic map again, but now the thousands of dots were pulsing in synchronized patterns. Ships throughout known space were receiving wake-up signals from the defiant dawn. "How many ships?" Vextal asked. 734 vessels, Harbinger replied. Each one carrying between 1,500 and 3,000 human personnel in stasis. Total active human population, approximately 1.8 million individuals. Chen nodded with satisfaction. 1.8 million humans who have spent 3 centuries learning about our enemies. 1.8 million humans who have been dreaming of this moment every night for 300 years. She activated another display that showed detailed intelligence reports on dozens of alien species. Military capabilities, cultural weaknesses, political structures, trade routes, population centers. The depth of information was staggering. While the galaxy celebrated our defeat, Chen explained, we were studying you. Every communication transmission, every ship movement, every political development has been monitored and analyzed. We know more about the current state of galactic civilization than most governments know about their own territories. Piptech was staring at his readings in disbelief. This is impossible. The processing power required for this level of intelligence gathering would require resources that we don't have, Chen interrupted. You're thinking like a conventional military force. We're not conventional. We're something new. Something that has never existed before. She gestured to the stasis chambers around them. These people weren't just sleeping, Engineer Piptech. They were learning. Their minds were connected to our computer systems, sharing memories, knowledge, and skills. A pilot could learn engineering. A soldier could master diplomacy. A scientist could become a strategist. Every human in our fleet has spent 3 centuries becoming the perfect weapon for the war we are about to fight. The screens showed more disturbing information: genetic modification programs, psychological conditioning protocols, enhancement procedures that pushed human capabilities far beyond their natural limits. We identified our weaknesses during the First War, Chen continued. Humans were individually weaker than most alien species. We were less technologically advanced. Our lifespans were shorter, which limited our strategic thinking. So we fixed those problems. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing skin that looked normal but seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. Enhanced muscle density, improved reaction times, redundant organ systems, extended lifespans. Every human in our fleet has been optimized for combat effectiveness. But it was the psychological modifications that truly frightened Zethkar. Chen explained how they had enhanced human memory to perfect recall. They had strengthened the human capacity for long-term planning. Most disturbing of all, they had amplified the human tendency to hold grudges. Other species forgive and forget, Chen said. Humans remember everything, and now we remember everything perfectly forever. Every burned human world, every murdered human child, every species that celebrated our defeat, every government that profited from our apparent extinction. We have perfect records, and we want perfect justice. The wake-up signals were spreading throughout the galaxy now. On distant worlds, ships that had been dismissed as ancient wreckage were powering up their engines. Space stations reported mysterious energy signatures from debris fields that had been stable for centuries. "What do you want?" Zethkar asked. "Want?" Chen laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Captain, we don't want anything. We already have everything we need. What we have is a debt to collect. The galaxy owes us 300 years of interest on a very old loan." The main screen showed a list that made Zethkar's blood freeze. It was a roster of every species that had participated in the human hegemony war, along with detailed calculations of what humanity considered fair compensation for their losses. The Hegemony Alliance destroyed 47 human colonies. Chen, read from the list. Total population killed, approximately 2 billion humans. Survivors enslaved, 800,000. Human territory seized, 12 star systems. Cultural artifacts destroyed, incalculable. She turned to face them again, and her eyes held the accumulated fury of 3 centuries. The galaxy thought they could destroy humanity and move on with their lives. They were wrong. We are the children of the species you tried to genocide. We are the ghosts of the people you murdered. And we have been waiting 300 years to introduce ourselves properly. Throughout the ship, more stasis pods were opening. Men and women emerged with the same alert readiness as Chen, as if they had simply been waiting for their turn to wake up. They moved with military precision, taking positions at control stations and weapon systems. "This is your choice, Captain Zethkar," Chen said. "You can return to your ship and spread the word that humanity has returned. Tell the galaxy that their 3 centuries of peace are over, or you can stay and witness the beginning of the reckoning." On the screens around them, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Ghost ships revealing themselves, human fleets emerging from hiding places that had been concealed for centuries. The galaxy's communication networks were lighting up with panic signals as the truth began to spread. Humanity was not extinct. They had never been extinct. They had been waiting, planning, and preparing for this exact moment. And now, after 300 years of perfect patience, they were ready to collect what the galaxy owed them. The transformation of the Defiant Dawn was like watching a corpse come back to life. Systems that had been dormant for centuries hummed with power. Corridors that had been empty filled with the purposeful movement of awakened humans. The ship, that had pretended to be dead wreckage for 300 years, revealed itself as a perfectly functioning weapon of war. Commander Chen stood in the ship's command center, surrounded by screens showing the awakening of the human fleet across the galaxy. Each dot on the galactic map represented another ghost ship revealing its true nature. Each signal represented thousands of humans emerging from their long sleep with 3 centuries of dreams focused on a single purpose: revenge. "Harbinger. Fleet status report," Chen commanded. 721 vessels have responded to the wake-up signal, the AI replied. 13 ships were destroyed by natural hazards during the wait period. Total active human population, 1.7,400,000 individuals. All ships report full combat readiness. Zethkar watched in fascination and growing horror as the humans worked with mechanical efficiency. There was no joy in their awakening, no celebration of their return to life. They moved like people who had a job to do, and that job was war. "You said you've been breeding," Piptek said, his voice shaking. "What did you mean?" Chen smiled that terrible smile again. "Show them Base 7, Harbinger." The screens changed to display another section of the ship. This one was filled with stasis pods, but these were smaller, designed for children. Hundreds of them, containing boys and girls who looked to be between 10 and 16 years old. "Genetic optimization programs," Chen explained. "We didn't just preserve the humans who went into stasis 300 years ago, we created new ones. Each generation designed to be better than the last, stronger, faster, smarter, and most importantly, more focused on our mission." The children in the pods began to wake up, and Zethkar could see immediately that they were different from normal human children. Their movements were too coordinated, their eyes too alert. These weren't children who had been sleeping. These were weapons that had been waiting to be activated. "Every child born in our fleet has been educated from birth with a single curriculum," Chen continued. "The history of the human hegemony war, the species responsible for our losses, the justice that must be delivered. They don't just know about the war, they've lived it every day of their lives." One of the children, a girl who looked about 14, approached Commander Chen and saluted with perfect military precision. "Commander, Tactical Analysis Unit 12 is ready for deployment. We have completed our 300-year study of Hegemony Alliance defensive capabilities. We know how to hurt them." Chen returned the salute. "Excellent work, Maria. Begin Phase 1 implementation. The girl nodded and moved to a control station, her fingers dancing across the interface with the skill of someone who had been training for this moment her entire life. Around her, other awakened children took positions at various stations throughout. The command center? Phase 1? Vextal asked. Information warfare, Chen replied. We're going to tell the galaxy exactly who we are and what we want. No more hiding. No more pretending to be dead. It's time for the universe to meet the new humanity. The main screen activated, showing what appeared to be a galaxy-wide broadcast. Chen stepped in front of the camera, her expression calm, but her eyes burning with centuries of accumulated anger. Greetings, galactic civilization, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ship's communication systems. My name is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiant Dawn. 312 years ago, you thought you destroyed humanity. You were wrong. Throughout the galaxy, the broadcast was being received on every communication channel, every news network, every government frequency. Emergency sessions were being called in dozens of planetary capitals as the impossible message reached their leaders. We are not extinct, Chen continued. We have been waiting, learning, preparing, and now we have returned to collect what you owe us. The broadcast showed footage from the human hegemony war, burning human colonies, destroyed human ships, murdered human civilians. But it also showed something else. Detailed intelligence reports on every species that had participated in humanity's supposed destruction. We know where you live, Chen said, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. We know your military capabilities, your economic systems, your cultural weaknesses. We have studied you for 3 centuries while you forgot we ever existed. That was your mistake. The screens changed to show the current positions of human ships throughout the galaxy. They were everywhere, hidden in asteroid fields, disguised as space debris concealed in nebulae and dead systems. The scope of humanity's deception was staggering. You divided up our worlds among yourselves, Chen continued. You enslaved our survivors. You celebrated our defeat and built your prosperity on our graves. For 300 years, you have enjoyed the peace that came from believing you had eliminated the human problem. That peace is now over. PipTech was monitoring galactic communication channels, and the panic was spreading like wildfire. Military fleets were being mobilized, emergency defense protocols were being activated, trade routes were being shut down, as governments tried to assess the threat. But Chen wasn't finished. We do not want your surrender. We do not want your apologies. We want justice. We want compensation for every human life you took, every human world you burned, every human child you murdered, and we will have it. The broadcast showed detailed calculations of what humanity considered fair payment for their losses. The numbers were staggering. Some species would have to give up entire star systems. Others would face complete economic collapse. A few would simply cease to exist as independent civilizations. You have 1 galactic standard year to begin payment, Chen announced. Those who comply will be treated fairly. Those who resist will learn why humans have survived when so many other species have not. We are patient, we are determined, and we never ever forgive. The broadcast ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Then the real panic began. How long before they organize a response? Chen asked Harbinger. Initial military responses are already being coordinated, the AI replied. The Hegemony Alliance is calling for an emergency session. 17 species have declared martial law. 3 governments have already fallen due to panic-induced civil unrest. Chen nodded with satisfaction. Good. Fear makes people make mistakes, and we have spent 300 years learning how to exploit their mistakes. She turned to Zethkar and his team, who had been watching the proceedings in growing terror. Captain, you and your crew are free to leave. In fact, I encourage it. Go back to your people. Tell them what you have seen. Spread the word that humanity has returned. What if they don't believe us? Zethkar asked. Chen's smile was like looking into the mouth of a black hole. Oh, they'll believe you soon enough. Because tomorrow we begin Phase 2. And Phase 2 is when the galaxy learns that the new humanity doesn't just make threats. Around them, the human crew was preparing for war with the efficiency of a species that had spent 3 centuries planning for this moment. Weapons were being loaded. Ships were being positioned. Intelligence networks were being activated. The ghost ships were no longer hiding. The sleeping army was awake, and after 300 years of perfect patience, humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they had learned during their long, dark dreams of revenge. 6 months after humanity's return was announced to the galaxy, the universe had become a very different place. What had once been a stable civilization built on the bones of human defeat was now a collection of terrified governments desperately trying to understand an enemy they thought no longer existed. Commander Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, watching as her fleet assembled in the Kepler Nebula. 700 ships that had hidden among the wreckage for 3 centuries now moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor and new weapons. They no longer needed to pretend to be dead. "Status report, Harbinger," she requested. "Phase 2 operations are proceeding ahead of schedule," the AI replied. 67 species have attempted to negotiate. 41 have offered partial compensation. 18 have declared war on humanity, and 3 have attempted to surrender unconditionally. Chen nodded, unsurprised by the numbers. The galaxy's response had been exactly what 3 centuries of study had predicted. Some would try to bargain, others would fight, and a few would panic completely. All of their reactions had been planned for. And the Hegemony Alliance? They have assembled the largest military force in galactic history. 2,000 ships from 43 species, all converging on the Procyon sector. They believe they can repeat their victory from 300 years ago. Chen's expression didn't change, but there was something like amusement in her eyes. "Show me." The main screen displayed the Hegemony fleet in all its impressive glory. Massive battle cruisers from a dozen different species, accompanied by thousands of smaller vessels and support craft. It was a force capable of conquering entire civilizations, and it was all focused on destroying humanity once and for all. "They still don't understand," Chen said quietly. "They think this is the same war they fought 3 centuries ago. They think we're the same species they defeated before." A young human officer approached, one of the children who had been born and raised during the long sleep. Lieutenant Marcus Webb had spent his entire 20-year life preparing for this moment, studying enemy tactics and learning to think like a weapon. "Commander," he reported, "our infiltration units are in position. The Hegemony fleet has no idea that we've been inside their communication networks for the past 6 months. And their battle plans? Completely compromised. We know their formation, patterns, their weapon capabilities, and their chain of command. More importantly, we know their psychological profiles. We know which commanders will break under pressure and which ones will fight to the end." Chen smiled, and it was the same terrible expression that had haunted Zethkar's dreams for months. Begin Phase 3. What happened next would be remembered as the Battle of Procyon, though historians would debate whether it qualified as a battle at all. The Hegemony Alliance fleet, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage, moved to engage the human forces in what they expected to be a decisive confrontation. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that had evolved far beyond their understanding. The human ships didn't engage in traditional combat. They used weapons that disrupted enemy communications, turning the massive alien fleet into isolated groups of confused vessels. They employed psychological warfare techniques that exploited the specific fears and weaknesses of each species. Most devastating of all, they used the Hegemony's own size against them. "The larger they are, the more ways we can hurt them," Chen explained to her tactical staff as they watched the battle unfold. "A small fleet can react quickly and make decisions efficiently. A massive fleet becomes a bureaucratic nightmare the moment something goes wrong. And everything was going wrong. For the hegemony forces, their command ships were being targeted by weapons that didn't just destroy them, but broadcast their destruction to every vessel in the fleet. Their communication networks were compromised, filled with false orders and contradictory commands. Their own size made it impossible to coordinate an effective response. But the most terrifying aspect of the human attack wasn't the technology or the tactics. It was the precision. Every strike was calculated not just for maximum military effect, but for maximum psychological impact. The humans weren't trying to simply win the battle. They were trying to break the enemy's will to fight. Hegemony flagship is requesting negotiation, Harbinger reported. Denied, Chen replied without hesitation. We told them they had a year to begin payment. They chose war instead. Now they learn the consequences of their choice. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted only 4 hours. When it was over, the Hegemony Alliance had lost 60% of their fleet without inflicting significant damage on a single human vessel. The survivors limped away carrying a message that would spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity had not just returned. They had returned as something unprecedented and terrifying, but Chen wasn't finished. Phase 3 had been about demonstrating human military capability. Phase 4 was about demonstrating human memory. Over the following months, human forces began appearing at specific locations throughout the galaxy. Not random targets or strategic objectives, but places with historical significance. The sites of former human colonies, the worlds where human survivors had been enslaved, the systems where human refugees had been turned away and left to die. Each location received the same treatment. Human ships would arrive, broadcast a simple message identifying the historical crime that had been committed there, and then deliver precise justice. Governments that had profited from human slavery found their economic systems crippled. Species that had celebrated human deaths found their military forces dismantled. Worlds that had been built on the graves of human colonies found themselves facing the same fate their victims had suffered. "We remember everything" became humanity's unofficial motto, broadcast on every frequency whenever human forces struck. We remember everything, and we will never forget. The galaxy's response was panic on a scale never before seen. Some species attempted to flee to distant galaxies, only to discover that human ships were already waiting for them. Others tried to hide in remote systems, but humanity's intelligence network had been watching for 3 centuries. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from an enemy that had perfect memory and infinite patience. But it was the psychological impact that truly broke galactic resistance. Other species fought wars for territory, resources, or ideology. Humanity fought for something far more primal and terrifying, the satisfaction of a grudge held for 300 years. "They don't want to conquer us," one alien diplomat reportedly said during a failed peace negotiation. "They want to punish us, and they're willing to spend forever doing it." A year after their return, humanity held undisputed control over 40 star systems and had reduced 12 alien governments to rubble. But more importantly, they had established a new rule for galactic civilization. Never assume humans are gone until you have personally counted every last body. Commander Chen stood in the same command center where she had first met Captain Zeth Carr, now almost 2 years ago. The Vorthan salvager had spread the word of humanity's return exactly as she had hoped, becoming an inadvertent prophet of the new age. "Final phase status?" she asked Harbinger. "All objectives achieved ahead of schedule," the AI replied. "Galactic civilization has accepted the new reality. Reparations are being paid according to our specifications. Human territory is being restored. The surviving human diaspora is being returned to our protection." Chen nodded, but there was no satisfaction in her expression. Victory, she had learned, was not the same thing as justice. Justice required not just winning, but ensuring that the lesson was never forgotten. "Begin the next phase," she ordered. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. Ever. The screens around her lit up with new plans, new preparations for conflicts that might not occur for centuries. Because that was what humanity had learned during their long sleep in the void. Other species planned for years or decades, but humans planned for forever. The galaxy had thought they had destroyed humanity 300 years ago. They had been wrong. And now, as human ships patrolled the stars and human children learned the history of their people's suffering, the universe was beginning to understand the most important lesson humanity had to teach. When you try to kill humans, you better make sure you get all of them, because the ones you miss will spend lifetimes planning their return. And when they come back, they won't just want victory, they'll want justice. Perfect, patient, and permanent justice. And they'll have as long as it takes to get it.